Did it ever occur to you how many diversity and inclusion initiatives are elitist, but everyone pretends that they're not? Today, you're going to find out why so many of these projects aren't intended to benefit everyone. I'm Jonathan Ashong-Lamptey, and this is the Resource Group's podcast, where every week I connect the dots in terms of best practices and practical research to help the people within your workplace reach their potential and drive performance through inclusive practices. I'm on a mission to give you the tools that you need to make a difference where you work. Get a pen and paper ready because in today's show, I'm going to discuss why so many diversity and inclusion initiatives are elitist, and this is something that is quietly ignored. This is the second of a two-part series of shows that were inspired by a recent panel event that I attended. As a regular listener of the show, you know how rare it is for me to attend panel events. And this show was inspired by a question that I raised for a panel that I thought could have been explored in more detail than it was on the night. Now, you've been to panel events, you know it's normally a group of leaders giving advice based on their experiences. On this particular night, I raised a couple of points. I drew attention to the fact that everyone on the panel was successful and a talented person. Everyone in the audience was pretty much successful and talented. A lot of the advice that I heard on the night was targeted at people who were successful and talented. And so my question directly asked, is all of this information, is all of this guidance just for successful and talented people? Now let's be honest, this was a really safe question because the safe answer is, of course, no, we want to make sure that everyone reaches their potential, not just some. And I get it. No one said anything wrong, no one said anything inappropriate, but part of me wanted someone to tackle the elitism that's built into these things. No one did, and so we're going to talk about it here. So I'm going to give you 3 points to consider that will help you to keep an eye out for elitism when it comes to diversity and inclusion practices. So let's get to it. The first thing to consider is the emphasis on promoting future leaders. One of the most common statements you hear at panel events, at conferences, is a version of, you can't be what you can't see. And what they're saying is, we need role models from underrepresented groups in order to encourage these groups to aspire to achieve at the highest level within an organization. Now, this means that you're going to need some talented people to get there. Actually, no. You're going to need some super talented people because these individuals are going to be under more scrutiny than anyone else. So there's an emphasis on being a super achiever, an award winner, which means that people who aren't super achievers may get left behind. Think about that. The opportunities for a Pakistani Muslim woman who's pretty good at her job is not the same as a white middle-class male who's also pretty good at his job. We all want to promote the best talent, but it seems that the penalty for being average is greater for underrepresented groups, and this is often ignored. What that means is, we're not talking about an inclusive workplace where everyone has the opportunity to reach their potential. Ignoring this does not help. Before we get to the second thing, I want to talk about the importance of sharing. If you hear anything that you find interesting, then please share it with one other person that you think would find it useful. If you're finding this for the first time, make sure you check out the show notes. You can access these wherever you're listening to the podcast. The show notes have got details of all the reports and all the resources that are mentioned in the show. I've put this together for you so that you can go deeper into anything that we discuss here. Now let's get back to talking about hidden forms of elitism. The second thing to consider is the emphasis on surface level diversity. The reality that most people don't want to face is that managing diversity and inclusion can often seem inconvenient and uncomfortable. And to be honest, that applies to any high standard pursuit within an organization. This is why surface level diversity programs are so attractive to organizations, because it allows you to indicate that you're inclusive without doing all the hard work. This is one of the reasons that middle-class white women have benefited so much from diversity initiatives, because often they study at the same institutions and come from the same social context as the incumbent middle-class white males. If you look at the representation of Black, Asian and other minority groups who become leaders, the majority have often studied at the same institutions and have the same social context as their incumbents. It's almost as if they want the same people who just have a different physical appearance, or the same people who tick a different identity box. As a consequence, these initiatives can become elite because they ignore people who didn't study at the same institutions, who don't have the same social context. Basically, they ignore diversity and favor more of the same. Now, this doesn't sound like a meritocracy. So what would you call it? The third and final thing that I want you to consider is advice that cannot be used by everyone. Now, let's take a step back. The truth is, bookstores are full of books that most people aren't going to read. Only the most proactive, motivated, hardworking people are going to pick them up. Now, most good career advice is also ignored by most of the people who hear it. And there's a chance that some of the listeners to this podcast listen but don't take action on the points made every week. They don't read the show notes and they don't look at the slides that are created every single week. Of course, I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about people you know. Now, that doesn't mean that the advice provided can't be used by everyone. However, some advice isn't meant for everyone. It's only meant for a minority of people because it's not possible for everyone to do it. It's not possible for everyone to have the CEO as their mentor. It's not possible for everyone to do a free internship at a prestigious company. It's not possible for everyone to have a social network full of high-status people who want to help you. The inconvenient question I was asking is, what is being done for the average employee? Let's get a little generic for a second. The truth is that most white people are going to be average at their jobs. Most black people are going to be average at their jobs. Most LGBT people are going to be average at their jobs. I could keep going about any identity group or any intersection of any of these groups. Fill in the blanks. But no single identity group has a monopoly on talent, intelligence, or mediocrity. So while there is guidance for the best, there's often not enough left for everybody else. And I'm talking like the kind of thing, it's kind of like a social good in economics. If you and I are literate, it benefits us, but it also benefits others. If you and I cultivate our developmental networks, it benefits us, but it also benefits others. If you and I consistently develop rare and valuable skills, it's going to benefit us, but it also benefits others. These are the types of advice that average people and superachievers can both use. This is important for your employee resource groups too, because some people use their employee resource group to raise their personal profile and then they disappear once they've won an award. But they can be used for so much more. Now, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong about the type of advice being provided, but what I am saying is that we should be clear about what we're doing, what we're saying, and who it's intended for. An exclusive focus on elite echoes the idea of the talented 10th. The talented 10th is a concept that was promoted by W.E. Du Bois. When he was talking about African Americans, he suggested that there was a need to develop what I would call an elite, a minority of people of incredible talent and skill. And what he suggested was that this talented 10th would raise the bar and standards for everybody else. The question that you should ask yourself in your organization is, what is your approach to promoting underrepresented groups? Is it to help everyone? Or is it a version of the talented 10th? If you want to discuss this with your friends and colleagues, I've created a slide deck for you. It summarizes everything that we discussed today because we want to give you the tools that you need to make a difference where you work. It's free and you can get this from the Resource Groups community on LinkedIn. So let's wrap this up. What are the key messages here? Well, the three things that explain why some inclusion initiatives are elitist are 1. The focus on developing future leaders. 2. The emphasis on surface level diversity. And 3. The advice that cannot be used by everyone. So what do you think? Are you part of a talented 10th? How do you feel about that? Get in touch or leave a message. I would love to hear from you. If you've learned something from today's show, you should sign up to our insider list. It's free and you can stay ahead of the pack and get the best of everything I produce. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.